Previously, we took a set of data. It was the distribution of fly wing lengths, and we gathered the frequency of the data set, and then we used that to compare the distribution to a normal distribution. Now we're going to take a step back and just use the frequency data to make a nice histogram, and not the automatically generated one from Excel, but one that we have a little more control over. So we're going to take an approach that doesn't quite work, and then we're going to see how to fix it. So we're going to highlight columns C and D, the sort of bin data and the corresponding frequencies, and make a column graph, so chart and then columns. And what we want to happen is for the frequencies to be represented by the columns, and for the bin values to end up as labels of those columns, and then we'll see that that doesn't quite happen, and then we will fix it. So what happened instead is that it treated both columns C and D as data and made two sets of columns. So we would like to fix this. So we right-click on the data and choose Select Data from the context-sensitive menu. The first thing we're going to do is highlight Series 1 and remove it. This means that if we had seen this from the start, then we should have only highlighted column D from the beginning. So at this stage, we will have just column D as our data. But in the same location as we are selecting the data source now, we highlight Series 2, which is column D, and we can edit the labels. So go over to the right-hand side and click on Edit to change the labels of the data. So now we are choosing column C, not as a separate set of data that we want to have columns for, but as labels for column D. So highlight column C and then click OK. As you might recall, our first bin value wasn't 3.6, but it was 3.60001 to get the data in the right bin. And so if you have these crazy numbers sort of hanging around, then you can right-click on the axis and format it and go to the number formatting and specifically choose one decimal place, and then you won't see in the axis labels any of this like 0001 stuff. So here we see the results so far. The bin labels are 3.6, 3.7, 3.8, etc., and the y-axis are the frequencies. Choose some quick layout. I think I chose 7 in order to get sort of axis labels and so on. My quick layout did not have a chart title, so I went to Add Chart Element. Remember, all these things are only available if the chart itself is highlighted. So I highlight the chart, go to Design, then go over to Add Chart Element, and then I chose Chart, and then where you wanted it. I wanted it above my chart. So after editing the x-axis and the y-axis and the chart title, I decided that I didn't like the sort of space between the columns, and that is known as the gap. So I right-clicked on one of the columns and chose to format the data series. The pane slid out from the right, and then I used the little bar to slider bar to take the gap width down to 0. So now all my columns have no gap, they're next to each other. The columns have both fill and border and so on. So here I am editing the border, giving it a solid line. Sort of each column is sort of surrounded by a border now. And here's my results. So this is a histogram, sort of rather like the automatic histogram that Excel makes, but I have a little more control over the labels and so on.